Hi, I'm Becky Parker Geist. I am the host of the Audiobook Connection podcast, Behind the Scenes with the Creative Teams. I'm also president of Bay Area Independent Publishers Association and the CEO and founder of Pro Audio Voices and Amplify Audiobooks, providing audiobook and podcast production, distribution, and marketing. And today I have with me Barbara Seeber. She's the author of The Empresario's Wife, the woman at the center of the Texas Revolution. Barbara is a National Geographic writer and editor and an award-winning feature writer. She is a 30-year veteran of the publishing world. Barbara, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So tell us a little bit more about your background. You've been publishing for a long time, working at National Geographic. That must have been very interesting. But let's back up even just a step further before that, because I love to hear about like when you got interested in writing in the first place. Do you even remember?
I do.
All right.
I do. I do.
Tell
I
us.
do. Um, well, I was I grew up in South Central Texas, sort of east of San Antonio and west of Houston,
Hmm.
in a little town called Seguin. And I was actually, I think, very lucky. I grew up in a house of women. I grew up with my great grandmother, my grandmother, and my mother, and my grandfather. My mother and father were divorced when I was very young. So I had a magical childhood, and when I had something called the Blue Horse Writing Tablet that I wrote stories in,
Hmm.
just little scribble things. When I was about four, I think, 4 or 5.
Yeah. Cool.
And of course, I wasn't writing anything, but I was imagining things, and then I would tell my stories
Nice.
to my grandmother, and she was avidly listening and hanging on every word. So, what better what better introduction to writing can a writer have? It seemed very important. I felt my stories were very important because my grandmother thought they were. And my
Wonderful.
great grandmother taught me to read. So I was very lucky to have that kind of beginning in a big old house that my even my great grandmother had grown up in. So it was I had a great childhood.
And a history in staying put. These days,
Yes, yes,
that's so
yes,
much less common, than
yes. Oh, I mean, that kind of extended family thing
yeah,
for me was so fabulous.
yeah,
And hardly anybody has that anymore.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
was there a lot of reading going on in your household?
Well, my mother was an English teacher.
Okay.
Um, but I think the real thing that I got so hooked on was I adored my grandmother, and I went with her everywhere. And so while my mother was very young, she was in her 20s and busy, and my grandmother just doted on me and took me with her everywhere. So I got to see how things work and how
Mm.
all these different characters and people, and they were all interesting. And so that was a great introduction to just, the life in a microcosm.
Yeah.
And and so
So do you think you were collecting characters at that point when you were young, sort of gathering the data?
absolutely. I think collecting characters is exactly what my writing is about,
Hmm.
because if I'm not interested in the characters, I'm not interested in the book,
Right, right.
or the TV show or whatever. So
Yeah.
yeah, character is all for me.
And then as you got older, did you find that your interest in writing was continuing on through school and sort of so I'd love to hear like that part of your journey
Well,
and
I was lucky. I went to University of Texas,
okay.
and for an unbelievably you know unimpressive amount. I mean, I think tuition at University of Texas in the late 60s was $50 a semester or something.
Yeah.
Anyhow, it was great. And I got into some advanced classes early on, and I had a professor who told me, Miss Hurt, you can write.
Mm.
And I thought, oh, because I didn't know what else I could do.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what else I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So then after college, I managed to escape getting married, which most young Texan girls did at that point.
Uh-huh.
I came close, but didn't. And then I went into the Peace Corps,
Oh,
and
okay.
then I became an English teacher for a while. And then I decided I couldn't take one more year of teaching because the administrators were driving me crazy. So I decided to jump into journalism, and it was very hard to go from being an English teacher to becoming a journalist.
Right.
I had no hopes of working for the Washington Post, but a new magazine was starting. And I had gotten an MA, so I had an MA in English,
Mhm.
but um, a new magazine called Science 80 was starting. And it turned out to be a really good magazine. I got a copy editor job.
Okay.
And from there, worked my way up. And then that got sold to National, then I mean, it got bought out
Mm-hmm.
because suddenly the science magazine marketplace was very crowded.
Oh,
There were suddenly lots of science magazines, and the magazine I worked for did not have a deep pocket. It was sponsored by AAAS, which was a prestigious association for the advancement of science. They published science journal, so
mm-hmm.
it had all the sort of science credentials, but not a deep pocket. Time bought it, had Discover, bought it out. And then I was like in the market for a job, and I managed to get a job at Geographic.
Nice.
So then
Did
I was
that did that then when you got that job, were you then traveling quite a bit or not so much?
not at first. I actually started out in a division called Ed Media, in which we were making CD-ROMs
Oh,
with
okay.
graphic pictures.
Yeah, I remember
And
those days.
yes, yes, yes. And then later I worked for books at Geographic. But yes, I did travel some, but I didn't work for National Geographic Magazine. I worked for two other divisions.
Okay.
But wonderful colleagues and contacts. So in fact, when I was working on my impresario's wife book, one of my colleagues at Books said, Barbara, let me read it. And she was editor-in-chief of National Geographic Books. And she said, I know you're working on this novel. I'd love to read it. And I said, oh, okay. And she turned out to be such a fabulous editor. So
Oh, wonderful.
I was so lucky. First of all, she was such a good editor, but second of all, she just said, okay, I love it. I just have a question right here. And so it was never like, don't do that. It was
Uh-huh.
just, give me a little more here or give me a little more there.
Mm, uh-huh.
So it was a wonderful process. And I love her dearly. And she's she's really remarkable editor.
That's
So
wonderful. Uh,
yeah.
At what point did you sort of make that decision or feel that urge to write your own book, to get into publishing in that way?
I'd always had it, but I couldn't figure, I wrote all these short stories and sent them off to the New Yorker, and nothing got published.
Uh,
And you know how hard that is.
yeah.
And so I had, my father had told me that, first of all, I didn't know my father till I was sort of out of college, in college and out of college, because my parents were divorced when I was so young.
Okay, yeah.
And but he turned out to be quite interesting, and he told me that we were related to the DeWitts, that they were we were lineal descendants. Well, I had learned about Green DeWitt in Texas history, but I had no idea it was my grandfather. Anyhow, so he said, we're related to Green DeWitt. And I'm thinking, as I learned more about it, well, not a lot of people knew who Green DeWitt was, but I did because I'd learned about Texas impresarios, in Texas history. So I knew he was, sort of one of the founding fathers when Texas began. And I kept thinking, I wonder what her life was like. And we didn't talk about her. My father just mentioned, this is who we're descendants of.
Yeah.
And so very slowly over time, I just started reading more about it was very early. It was 1820s. There was nothing about her. I mean, nothing. And so I had to grasp at straws. I had to find every little reference I could. And there was the occasional reference when the colony was mentioned and Green DeWitt was mentioned and so forth. And then there would be sort of this afterthought. And she and her children made the Texas flag that started the first battle of the Texas Revolution. So I thought, well, that's pretty important.
Yeah.
And so as I sort of built up this world view of what was it like in the 1820s I had a full-time job and I had 2 children, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah,
so I was not doing it and I was still trying I was writing magazine articles and other things, but I wasn't really trying to get a book published. And then I did actually publish a couple of nonfiction books. But I still wanted to, the more I found out about Sarah, she just became more of an obsession with me, I guess. And I have a cousin who I didn't know until the book was published, and he called and said, "You don't know me, but I'm your cousin." Um, he said, "I've been in his best Texas, accent. I've been wondering all my life why nobody ever wrote a book about this woman. Why you've done it." So, she was sort of known locally. And he knew because he was he too was a descendant of Green DeWitt.
Yeah.
So
it sounds like you had this idea for the book, and then the impresario's wife book, and you were gradually over many years sort of chipping away at the research. Is that right?
correct.
Yeah.
Correct. I was doing a lot of other things.
Sure. Yeah.
But it was always there. And, I would sort of try when I had time off, which, was like 2 or 3 weeks. And then I'm not going to spend my whole vacation doing this.
Right.
So, it took a while.
Yeah. Once you started into that research, tell us a little bit about that process. Like, did you find, you'd mentioned that there wasn't really much available.
It was all about the battles.
Okay. So where were you?
Everybody's heard of the Alamo, right?
Right.
And it was all about the Alamo and what led up to the Alamo and the men and the battles and, without a lot of context. And, you just had to sort of piece things together.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you approach it? What were the ways in which you approached that research?
Well, I found as I read over time, there were a lot of facts that I absolutely had to, go by. I couldn't omit. And so, number of children and when they came and how they came and et cetera, et cetera. There were actually a number of facts if you dug around until you found some connection here and some connection there.
Yeah.
And of course, there were some things that were wrong, that like birth and death dates and things. But I started by making an outline of what was the timeline chronological, what
piecing
happened.
together the history in that way. Yeah, timeline.
And then finally, at some point, I just sort of broke away from that because you have to imagine. And I knew that I wanted a picture of life at that time and that it wasn't just white men.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the fact that there were Native Americans, there were Mexicanos, there were Tejanos, there was all these cultures that were already there.
Right.
And you never heard about or so.
Yeah. Interesting. So, okay. So as you were you were piecing all of this together then and starting to get a sense of that history that was I gather was like accumulating as you did your research. And then what would you say is the if there is a particular aspect of her life that you feel like most drew you in?
Well, I have this wonderful aunt who is turning 100 in October. And she lived in Gonzales, the little town. I don't know if you've read the book, but the hub of the colony was Gonzales, which was about uh, 30 miles from where I grew up.
Mhm.
And so my aunt, I had known her, she'd been a part of our family for a long time. And she was president of the Historical Society. She was very proud of Gonzales's history.
Mhm.
And so she took me to places and talked about things because she was very proud of Gonzales
Uh-huh.
and the role it had played in the whole birth of Texas.
Yeah.
And so when she actually took me to places that it was thought that where the DeWitts had lived, it was like, oh wow. I was really like electrified by that.
Right. 'Cause sort of brought it home to you in a physical way, is that right?
Right. I mean, it was right here, it was
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah.
It's the past is it's not gone. It's
Right. Right. Yeah. Interesting. So, yeah, what I would love to do, let's actually just take a short pause. I want to come back after the break, and then let's talk about the audiobook process because I love for our listeners to learn more about your experience with that process, and so we'll take a short pause. We'll be right back.
okay.
2025 winner of the IPPY Awards, Best Regional Fiction, The Impresario's Wife. Quote, "This is a story of female grit and determination in the face of overwhelming challenges. There is enough romance, tragedy, and excitement to keep the pages turning. An engrossing, drama-fueled addition to Lone Star State Chronicles." End quote by Kirkus Reviews, 2025. It's 1827, and Sarah Seeley DeWitt finds herself at the center of Texas history in its earliest and bloodiest period. Sarah's journey from St. Louis to Texas catches her up in a love triangle, forces her into a struggle for her family's survival, and pitches her headlong into the whirlwind of war. Based on actual events leading up to the 1836 Texas Revolution, The Impresario's Wife chronicles the struggles of a young American everywoman and the events that changed her and the nation forever. Get your copy of The Impresario's Wife, the woman at the center of the Texas Revolution, on Amplify Audiobooks today. All right, so coming back to the audiobook process, you chose Jen McCool as your narrator. Tell us first a little bit about what your experience was like in in that selection of the narrator. Your if you can remember back, but your thoughts about the kinds of qualities that you were listening for as you were listening to the different auditions.
Okay, well, first of all, I was a total novice. I myself have never listened to an audiobook. And that my son listens to them all the time. Many of my friends do, but I'm just a like to have the book in my hand kind of reader.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so the process of finding a narrator was really for me sort of mysterious. And so we started listening to through your staff. We started, and because I think my husband had a connection with you from earlier.
Right. Yeah.
Um, so we started listening to little samples of people reading things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we listened to 9 different people, and then we whittled it down to 6 and then down to 3. But the quality of Jennifer McCool's voice to me was the closest to what I imagined Sarah would sound like.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a sort of calm, patient, empathetic,
Mm-hmm.
solid, but but it was at the same time soothing, and you could listen. I could imagine listening to it for longer than a minute.
Yeah.
And so I think it was, that quality of voice that she exhibited.
Yeah. Did you find it hard to narrow it down? You say you
Yes.
whittled it down.
It
Yeah.
was
Yeah. It can be hard.
the last 3. I think you were part of the
Oh.
I think
Mm-hmm.
that you were part of the last 3.
All good. All good. Yeah. Yeah. Great. And what are there other things just about, so you've been through pretty much through the entire process of production at this point, and are there other things about the process that either surprised you or were that you felt like, oh wow, I didn't know that. That's an
Hold
interesting.
on, I have to let that dog out. One
Okay.
sec. Say that again.
Yeah.
Other
Yeah.
things
So
that were part of the production.
I'll ask it
Yeah.
again. Um,
Uh-huh.
so now you've been through the full production process of the audiobook, and since this was new to you, as you said, I love sharing, having authors share things that maybe surprised them or that, um, they didn't expect, because there are other, many of our listeners are authors sort of deciding about the process. So I like to give them insight from others as to what jumped out at you. Was it anything?
Well, for one thing, I just didn't know anything about the ins and outs,
Mm-hmm.
but it was much more arduous than I expected, because um, in my I wouldn't have named a character Eugenio if I know how hard it would be was to get his name right. And I speak Spanish, so he might have been Juan instead of Eugenio. Um, but I think I mean, I and a friend of mine from Geographic who had been through narrations in the studio, we sort of yearned for the fact that we to be in the studio with the person and say, no, it's not this, it's this.
Mm-hmm.
And some of these things are just so regional.
Oh, right.
They're
Mm-hmm.
not wrong. They're not wrong. They are simply a regional variation.
Right.
And since actually the book won the IPPY Award for Best Regional, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that we tried to make sure that we got all the regional things right. But
Yeah.
I think, we probably could have handled that better if I had just done a long recorded list of here, this is the, these are, it just, it went on and on in terms of things that she had trouble with because I didn't anticipate that that would be a problem,
Yeah,
whether.
so just to clarify for our listeners, so some of the things that we're talking about in terms of regionalisms, things like the use of either versus neither, things like that, and really specific
Live oak rather than
yeah,
whatever,
like
however.
pronunciations. So
It-
just to highlight for our listeners the importance and value of taking the time to really get clear on, what things like that, if your book is, especially if it's set regionally, I'm very specific region, and that matters to you, that's an important thing to bring up with, and to make clear in that early process, um,
right,
because without going into, too far into the weeds, just to say that we ended up after the first pass of recording, there were quite a number of pickups, or like re-record on
right.
names and things that we had to wade through and sort out, and which were important and which ones weren't, and so yeah. So again, I like to let listeners know, like, what are some of these aha moments or discoveries that anything we can learn from in the process to make it easier for them as they move
Sure.
forward. Yeah. And then I'd also love to hear about like what your aspirations moving forward with the audiobook and book. What's coming up for you? What would you like to have happen?
In terms of in terms of takeaways, sort of.
Yeah, well, that if you have any more, but also just with the book and the audiobook, like what's coming up next for you? Maybe if you're writing a sequel, or it could be if you have big plans for the impresario's wife that you'd like to share. I know that we'll be seeking some further reviews, more editorial kinds of reviews as well, and it's already won awards. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, of course, as much exposure as possible.
right,
There does seem to be a little bit of film interest at this point, so we'll see
right,
where that goes. But
yeah,
not, but I guess I, in my, I don't really know what to expect in terms of the audiobook. But I think in terms of takeaways, I think that it's really important. Um, the role of women and the diversity, diverse, the role of diversity in
mm,
various cultures in our history and in our lives.
yeah.
I mean, look at the turmoil we're in right now
I know it's insane,
about diversity and and women.
right?
And it's sort of very important to me that however people get this message, whether it's, orally or through visually through reading, um, this struggle um, didn't start, in the 60s. It didn't start in the
Right.
20s. It started, you know, and
Generations ago. Yeah.
so many people have told me, I had no idea that this was an important chunk of our history.
Yeah.
It just seemed like some obscure something.
Right. Yeah.
It is very much a part of the American story that the whole push west, how the West was won. Well, it was won by women and foreigners.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
And so that and the fact that the past is not past, we
Yeah.
build on it. And again, I've heard from so many people how much they appreciated the quote at the beginning, the George Eliot quote.
Yeah.
And it's because it's about unsung heroines and or heroes. There's the unsung in our lives that make our lives better and that we don't always get credit and that often don't get credit. And so I
Absolutely.
think
Yeah.
those are sort of the powerful messages I want the next generation of readers to understand.
Yeah. Good. Good. And how can our listeners learn more about you and your writing? Could you share your website?
Yes, it's barbaraseeber.com. And you know,
And
that's
Seeber is Seeber.
mhm,
Yep.
mhm. And on Pro Audio Voices on your platforms.
Yes. Yes, and the Empresario's Wife, at the time that we release this, it will be available on Amplify audiobooks. We always encourage our listeners to get it there so that they can build
It's
connection with
on
you.
It's on Amazon. It will be available
Yep,
audibly through there,
that's
and
right.
there are a lot of reviews, custom reviews on Amazon, as well as a lot of reviews on my website, and lots of information about me.
Yeah, great. Well, Barbara, I want to thank you so much for being with me. Barbara Seeber, the author of The Empresario's Wife and more. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.